Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be flying the Beechcraft Duke Turbine. Now, we had a great little week last week where we were kind of going over the traditional piston-powered one. I figured this week would be a good time to go ahead and take a look at the turbine-powered one. Now, some of you are probably saying, aren't these really the same plane? But there really are some differences between the two, and we're hoping to sort of explore them and kind of show you them. So let's stop chatting and let's get started. So we're up here at Toronto today, CYYZ, da-da-da-da. Da, 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 to basically experience this really, really cool plane. And now the turbine makes a plane that's already pretty great, really great. And it's one of my favorite kind of conversions, sort of combinations, sort of a thing like that. It really is an impressive plane, and it will get you there very, very quickly. And that's one of the neat things about it. Yes, it's not the same thing as like a Beechcraft, let's say a King Air or Queen Air or anything like that, which is basically the analog we're dealing with here. But it definitely works. So first things first, we're going to kind of get everything sort of ready to go here. And there's a lot of little things we can do to kind of get this kind of party show here, show on road, so to speak. So the first thing I'm going to do is head over to payload, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of get rid of all the junk we don't need. And I'm going to grab myself some external power. And the reason, of course, external power is nice to have is it is a very, very warm day today. Of course, we're loading up a bunch of passengers. I'm going to go ahead and get some cabin air going. Pop on the blower. We don't need any of this heat stuff, so I can just pop it to blower mode here. Now, one of the interesting things here is you probably notice we do have an air conditioner on board this particular aircraft. You can see this little auto cool option kind of a thing like that. And it's actually really cool because when you slip that option on, there's this little hatch that actually pops out of the top here. And now you can see this one right here popping up. And this is basically to help keep the compressor of the actual air conditioning kind of cool, or the condenser, I should say. And the neat thing with this particular unit is it's going to create a lot of drag. So when we do use air conditioning, you just got to kind of be mindful of that. The other thing you'll probably notice, if you take a look real quick, is this comes off the accessory fan. And the reason that matters to us is we don't get AC unless the engine's running at a specific RPM. So unfortunately, as much fun as it is to just click that button and be like, all right, let's cool off, ain't going to happen until you get the party started, so to speak. So it's just kind of one of those nice little details. So I'm actually going to shut that off to basically prevent there from being any shenanigans or goings-ons. So we're just going to rip around, go ahead and pop these things off. We're going to make sure the engine condition's set, RPM is down. One thing you got to be really, really careful with this on is you do have a beta range, and it's a pretty distinctive beta range here. For me, there's this little like kind of thing it sort of snaps to. You can see how it kind of goes click. Your beta range is everything here. And of course, what you're probably noticing is there's also a reverse range. If you want to get into that reverse range, you have to bind a key on your keyboard to do it. So for me, I have a big button that says hold for reverse. I push it, and then I push my normal throttle forward. You can actually see how we can engage the reversers here, which are very, very, very powerful in this particular aircraft. So for me, I'm just going to be leaving it in beta here, just basically keep it smooth. And again, beta is just sort of a way to make it a little easier to taxi and kind of all that other good stuff that usually comes with it. So we're going to get this party started. I'm going to begin, of course, turning on our bacon light right quick. We are running off of our good friend, the GPU here. We're not running off of ship power, which is perfectly fine. We can run either. The advantage to the GPU, of course, is you're going to be getting a much stronger start because the voltage is going to be more steady than the onboard power. And speaking of onboard power, you probably observed we actually have two separate batteries on board, just to give you an idea of just how much airplane this is. And of course, one of the things they notice is you can switch them on and off to kind of confirm they both work. Something we'll take a look at in a minute. So getting this thing started, really, really simple to do, which is one of the things I kind of like about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to confirm that we are indeed on the correct fuel tanks, which we is, so to speak. Make sure my RPM is up. I'm going to make sure my mixture is down, my engine condition. Notice we have two conditions here. We have on or off. Isn't that convenient? It's a little latch that it kind of snaps into, which is awesome. I'm going to make sure all my other switches are good. I'm going to make sure my circuit breakers are good over on that side. Oxygen's turned off. I got the window open right now. We'll have the engine going in a few moments, so I'll be able to get that air conditioning going. One thing I do want to do, though, is I want to pop my head down here. I've got my oil doors and all those kind of things, so we're going to kind of leave them open up right now quick. We're going to go ahead and open up our ice deflectors as well. And what they are these little hatches, kind of hard to see. And what they're going to do is basically deflect all sorts of nasty debris out of the engine when we start it, especially. So if I go to my engine real quickly here, you can actually see there's a bunch of foreign objects. Apparently rain is my current foreign object. It's not very intense, but each one of these engines is $500,000. So if you want to go ahead and shove all sorts of nastiness in them, you go ahead. I'm not a fan of that idea, kind of a thing like that. So we're pretty good to go. I'm just not going to worry about that too much. So we're going to get it started. Really, really easy process to get it started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and engage the starter. We're just going to go right from the top. Ignition, we're going to turn that on. You'll hear it snapping away. We're going to go ahead and turn on the starter. And what's going to happen is the RPM is going to start slowly rising. So you're going to see your fuel pressure come up, and you're going to see your NG, which is your RPM. What we're looking for is at least 15 degrees, or 15% overall as far as our NG goes. And it's just going up. It's going up. It's going up. I'm just going to grab onto the condition lever, and we're waiting for it to peak out. which looks about there. Click. Listen for it. Keep your hand on it, keep your hand on it, keep your hand on it. ITT, ITT. Get your hand on it, get your hand on it. Ah, sweet. So in a few moments, what's going to happen is the temperature usually comes back up a little bit, and then it goes back down. See it? See it? Get your hand on it, get your hand on it. You can see exactly the moment to introduce more fuel into the system. And it looks like we're stabilizing at about 640 degrees here, which is pretty good, and we're also about 65%. And you can see a couple instruments are starting to get a little happy there, which is a good news for us. And of course, that's awesome. So that was a really, really good start. So the book says we're not allowed to start both on the GPU. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to quickly go ahead, come over to my battery master. I'm going to flip that on, switch this to generator, and then I'm going to shut off my ignition. What I'm actually going to do is ask them to go ahead and disconnect the electrical power here. I'm going to go ahead and shut that off. Nothing bad will happen because we are running on that other one. We can see we have 28.5 volts, and we can see we're pulling about 19 amps, which isn't bad. Keep in mind, I did shut the air conditioner off. We'll get it going. Don't worry. Don't worry. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go pop over to our other option, and we're going to get the other side started. So again, same process. Just like that. You can see the RPMs coming up smoothly. Remember, we're running off ship power now, so it's going to be a slightly different power. You're just going to see the RPMs not going to get as high, which is, again, just to show you how accurately they did some of the different components in this airplane. So that's 15. We're good to start now, but again, if you want to kind of make these engines last, which I do, again, remember how expensive these things are, 18 looks pretty good. We're going to go and pop it to the on button, keep our hand on it, and we're just going to monitor the ITT. Keep in mind, if you are pointing into the wind, these temperatures are going to be a little bit lower, and these things will actually kind of freewheel on their own. It's really, really cool how that works. Looks like we have a good start there, and I'm just waiting for it again. So you can see our system amp right now is 120. We're still running the starter. And look about 62, 64, and the starter should just engage now, so that's going to look pretty good to us. Fabulous. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and now kick the generator on. I'm going to go ahead and kick off the ignition. Now we're ready to kind of get the party started here. I'm going to pop those on just like that. And as I can see, everything is running beautifully. All my stuff is initiating. I've got a master caution, which is fine. Nothing you need to worry about. But what I am going to do, though, is I'm going to flip this thing onto max cool. Go ahead and close the window on this thing right away. Now, one thing you have to remember is when you are using the AC on this thing, I showed you a minute ago, and I'll go ahead and show you this on the cabin. You'll notice my compressor needed that minimum RPM to start the party, but now the compressor is working, and I did put my blower on max high here, and this thing is just going to be transferring some of the nasty heat that we have in here out. One thing you just want to check, though, is make sure these handles aren't pulled out, because if they are, you're going to be taking this extremely hot air and basically shoving it into the cabin, and it's not going to do much for us. The other thing, too, is you can see my cabin air here. I've actually relieved that there as a desperate attempt to try to cool this thing off. The AC, it works okay. It's not fantastic, but it will cool you off eventually. So it's just kind of one of those things you just have to be mindful of. And again, all of our engines are booting up quite smoothly. I can give it a quick little tap to make sure everything's working, and I can see everything's running pretty smoothly. Very not unusual to have different RPMs. Remember, of course, this one has to work harder than the other one does, so you're going to have some differences there. If it really bothers you with the different RPMs here, one of the things you could do is you can come down to the engine trend monitor. You can actually switch over to kind of this mode, ETM mode, and you have this thing that says increment to increment. We don't play with that. We go to page up and page down. So you can actually see here the torque between the two engines here. You can also see the RPM to the two engines. You can see we're pulling about 20 shaft horsepower from the right. You can see your fuel consumption. You can see all that logs. You can see all the damage I've done to this thing. Again, I've got quite a few hours on this thing now between the different liveries, and of course it keeps all that separate. So this is a good time, of course, now that the air is starting to flow, to kind of get all of our navigation set up. So we're using the GTN 750 today. This is a free one. You can just basically pop online and grab it if you need. We'll also get this guy warmed up. He's going to take a few minutes. The weather should be pretty clear today. I'm going to have some turbulence kind of halfway, but nothing I'm too worried about. We're also going to get our transponder fired up. So this one's a great unit. I press the direct key, we're going right over to Bradley International Airport because science. Press the enter key there. It's going to say Windsor Locks, Connecticut. That's 322 nautical miles. Are you insane? Yes, I'm not insane, but I do want to go 322 nautical miles. So this is all queued up and ready to go, so I can leave that alone. Speaking of that, I'm going to confirm that my pitch trim is on the on position. This thing should not be booted up. We could run through the test on this. We could run through the inertial separator test. There are so many things we could test on this one, and we still have some warning lights up top. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get this thing all squared away for a lovely, lovely climb here. A bunch of different altitudes. I'm going to opt for 25,000, which is going to be very, very high for us, but it's going to work great as far as getting everything all set up here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to float my head down here to the pressurization system. This is unfortunately a little tedious to use. The key thing with pressurization is you just have to remember that on the way down, you can never have less pressure inside the cabin than you have outside. And even if you don't touch this knob after setting it once, you theoretically will not have to mess with it, even though some people get really, really kind of tricky with it. Like they'll start coming in here, like kind of micromanaging it on the way down. In my opinion, it's one more thing to go wrong that you're going to mess up. So we're going to 25,000 today. So we're going to give ourselves at least 500 extra feet here to basically kind of do that. And again, we're not pressurizing anything right now. Theoretically, we could pressurize all the way down. This one's a little different. Because we're using the gas turbine to help pressurize us here, we can actually leave the pressurized button on the whole time. And that makes it a little bit safer for us than kind of our competitors, so to speak. The one with the regular engine kind of a deal. So I'm taking a look up here. It's still 82 in here. It's pretty warm outside too. All right, that looks good. Just going through all my different buttons, making sure everything looks good. That looks good to me. I'm not going to play with the baggage door. We don't need oxygen. We have plenty on board. Like I said, it's going to tell you that you left heater heat and stuff like that on, but we're going to kind of hold off on that until we get a little bit closer. One last thing we can do before we get rolling. Again, I'm just quickly visualizing to make sure everything's good. You can see our engine oil temperature. This is the really only temperature we need to worry about in this aircraft. And you can see it's chilling at about 15. And again, we do have the door wide open. And you're not really going to have a lot of trouble with this, but just it's one more thing, as I like to kind of say. So anyway, let's get rolling. And one of the cool things is I can zoom around. I can see that our takeoff airport, or runway rather, and this is the airport obviously, is just south of us. So I'm just going to turn us around and get us on this and kind of get the party started. So this one's kind of fun. You take the parking brake off, and you'll probably notice the aircraft starts moving backwards. Wasn't expecting that, was it? So when you hit the brake, when you go backwards, of course, the tail will smack on the ground. One of the things I was mentioning a minute ago is we have a dedicated beta range on this aircraft. So one of the things you'll discover is in that beta range, you have different positions to go. You'll notice if I nudge the throttle forward just a tiny bit, what's going to happen is the aircraft is going to engage and it's going to go forward. If I pull the throttle back a little bit, the aircraft will slow down and it'll actually start backing up. This is one of the great features of turboprops. You're sitting here going, are you kidding me? No, that's actually how that works. So what I've done now is I've gone ahead and got myself in the neutral position in the beta range. My parking brake is not engaged in my propellers. You can't see this, but they're actually not biting into the air at all. They're just whizzing through kind of a thing. So one of the cool things is while I'm in beta, one of the cool things I can do is I can go ahead and push my right foot forward and I can go ahead and give it just a tap like that. What that will do is that will basically cause one of them on one side to kind of kick in, which will get us sort of rolling sort of in that direction. There we go, just like that. And of course, once it gets going, I can pull it back into beta and basically feather the beta setting to control my speed on the runway rather than ever touching the brakes. And that's one of the great things about this aircraft. So now that I'm heading in the direction I need to head, I'm actually pulling it out of the regular range and actually almost into the reverse position. Again, you don't have to tap the brakes hard on this one. If you want to go into reverse, you can. But if we do go into reverse, like I said, this thing will slow down fast. So the trick here is you don't want to use too much, you don't want to use too little. It's kind of like a sweet spot right about there when you're taxiing. And when you hit that spot, you'll see that it just goes. It's a very smooth, very easy to communicate. Again, I just pull it all the way. My throttles are at 0 right now, and you can see this thing is just sort of chilling in the general direction of my lovely runway up here. So now that I'm approaching the runway, we can go ahead and make sure everything is operable here. We're just going to hit a couple more switches here. Pitot heat's on and off. Click, click, click. I also like the fuel vent heat just in case. And of course, your warning lights are going to be relatively straightforward. We're going to get a warning about the oil door, which is open, by the way. It'll change color based on how annoyed it is. Notice, by the way, we're slowing down. I have the beta all the way back, or the throttle all the way back. Yeah, we're just going to sneak out of the runway real quick here. Approaching 2-4, right. Anybody who has that system on knows exactly what I'm joking about there. And we're going to go ahead and tap the brake there. I'm going to put my beta in neutral here and make sure we're not rolling backwards, which is pretty goofy. Looking at my approach, it is a beautiful day here in Toronto, so it makes it pretty easy for me. One thing I'll do is I'll just go ahead and get on my default nav and everything kind of squared away. Make sure everything looks good down here. I'm going to make sure I'm on nav 1. I'm going to make sure my CDI is on GPS mode. We're in turn mode, which makes sense. This makes no sense whatsoever. Our desired track is definitely not that particular. This is our current track. We want desired track. So let's see here. Desired track is 117. So what I'm going to do is come in here and go ahead and dial in 117. 117 right there. So that's looking pretty groovy to me, if you ask. Go ahead and check one last time to make sure all of our switches are good. Landing lights pop on. You can leave the taxi. It's pretty bright outside. One last check on my switches on the left. Everything's good. Pressurization. We're not dumping or anything. Air condition. We don't use the air conditioner for takeoff. It's just like anything. Not that it's doing anything for us. It's still 88 degrees in here. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that off. If you want, you can kind of leave the blower on and like open the cabin air to like try to cool it. But let's be realistic. Until we get some altitude underneath us, it's going to be pretty warm in here. So I'm going to go ahead and look up this way. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead and pull us out of beta there. And again, it doesn't take anything to get this airplane to start rolling forward. I'm just going to tip my head down just a little bit so you can kind of see what we got going. Like I said, I love this plane. I've been flying virtual models of this plane since like 2005. It's just like one of those things. I don't know, it always puts a smile on my face. Go ahead and roll into the runway. One of the things I love about this is the takeoff distance on this is unscientific. It's fantastic. I love it. Just kind of square us away there. I'm getting a warning light. Does not surprise me in the slightest. The warning light, by the way, is the one that says it's getting hot in here. Of course it's getting hot in here because unfortunately, like I mentioned, we got to get the AC going, but it's tough to get going until we really start rolling. All right, we have a bit of a crosswind as evidenced by that lovely sock there. Takeoff on this thing is a little goofy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the brakes, which I am. I'm going to go ahead and engage about half throttle. And you don't want any surge here, so you got to kind of let it kind of catch. The propeller blade will bite into the air. See how the whole plane crouches a little bit? But notice we're not really going very quick here. So I'm just going to give it a second to stabilize. You really want to let those two blades come together. So I'm going to go ahead and start pushing my throttle the west of the way. If you have a little detent like I do, it's the 75% mark. It's just shy of 75. You can do a reduced power takeoff, but the key thing here is when you're sitting here, don't go full blast. You're going to build up torque as you go. So I'm going to release the parking brake. Well, in this case, it's my standard brakes. Go ahead and give myself a little bit of compensation for that strong crosswind. We're going to get ripping down the runway here. Notice my torque rose, and that's just one of the fun things that it does. There's 80 knots. We're going to go ahead and give it a nice gentle tug. Be very careful with your ailerons when you're doing cross corrections. We're going to get the landing gear up immediately. We used no flaps for takeoff today, so I'm not worried about it too much. Now, what we have to do is we have to get ready to contain the absurd amount of climb capacity this aircraft has. So right now, I'm climbing at about 120 knots at a, 15-degree cabin angle. It's that kind of an airplane. So what I'm going to do is, kind of like I said, between 120 and 130. 130 is kind of a sweet kind of medium is what I like to call it. And as you'll observe, I'm doing about, 3,500 feet per minute, which is plenty. All right, we're just going to take our nice gentle turn here. This is a little out of procedure, but for this particular aircraft, it's kind of par for the course, so I'm not too worried about it. Boop. Then go ahead and switch that radar on, get some weather information here. Not that there's going to be any. I can see some clouds over there in the distance, but like I said, I'm not panicking. One thing we want to confirm, of course, is I'm just looking down there on the right. Everything's looking pretty good. I'm actually going to go turn the AC back on. We'll deal with the drag just to cool this thing off because it's literally 93 degrees in here. That's hot enough. And of course, we can open up the cabin air to help us out just a tiny bit. Pressurization is functioning normally, though, and that's kind of one of the things I always check during my initial sort of let's go kind of a thing. All right, we can pop off the landing lights. They're actually not visible when the landing gear are retracted, so we could theoretically leave them on the whole flight. It's probably not recommended procedure, but like I've never, nobody's ever complained. Let's get the autopilot all squared away here. We're going to switch that to nav. We've already gone ahead and selected our desired altitude, so we're just going to come over here and engage it. Be careful, this knob will switch. So be careful with this autopilot. It has a really strong tendency to accidentally pop you into go around mode. So just be kind of thoughtful, like I said, and you will know exactly what I mean. Because look at the cabin angle here. This is uncomfortable for any passenger I've ever met. You can just see just how much of a climb we've got going here, and that's one of the things that makes this plane fabulous. And again, it's going to cool off very, very quickly in here. As a matter of fact, we could even go like this and really try to cool this thing off. So again, 140 is a good speed. Remember, your cabin angle is up here at the stupid 12.5 degrees. That's not comfortable for passengers. Remember that. Real-world passengers don't. There's also a little detail that we did miss. We should have left our ignition on automatic during that climb, because just in case we have like a flame out. So I'm looking out the window. I'm not seeing anything interfering as far as foreign object debris or anything along those lines. So what I am going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and close up the ice deflectors. They're going to give us a little bit better climb here. And again, I'm just going to appreciate this nice, relaxing kind of rising upwards. And again, if you want to be a little more ginger with this, one of the things you can do is you can cruise a little bit flatter at about 7.5 degrees. The nice thing about cruising at that low is you're going to be a lot less likely to be, like I said, look at this. You'd be feeling like you're going up a roller coaster. It's insane the angle that this thing climbs at. And again, another reason why I think this plane is goofy. Now, one of the things you have to do on your climb, of course, is a lot of little details we have here. We have our torque measurement. We have to make sure we stay inside the safety. We have our interstage turbine temperature. We need to make sure that's safe. Our NG needs to be safe. Generally, you don't have to play with this one, by the way. RPM, we just have to make sure we don't go and basically over-rev it. You're not going to over-rev it. Don't worry. And, of course, don't panic that these numbers don't agree. They're never going to agree in a real plane. Relax. They're not going to agree in this plane either. So, like I said, don't worry about it. It's part of the fun, as I like to say when it comes to navigating. One other detail we do need to keep an eye out, of course. If you scroll down here, we've got our temperatures. You can see that my temperature for my oil has actually come down substantially. And it's also getting kind of cool in here. So I'm actually going to flip to auto real quickly here, just to give you an idea of just how fast that thing chills. And again, you can see our little AC evaporators and compressors doing the best it can to try to cool us off a little bit. And it's working. I mean, even the cabin air is strong. And one of the things you probably notice is the cabin air, this little butterfly valve is closed closed. And the reason it's closed is because we're pressurized right now. We can't really open this up and let the air just come rushing in. That won't go well for us. So just kind of keep that in mind. But again, it's 35 degrees outside already. It's plenty. You can actually push that closed. Again, it doesn't matter because it can't get past that point anyway because we're now pressurized and that little needle slams shut. Now, for those of you not sure how the pressurization system works on this one, it's just remember that from our compressors all over some of the compressor sections over here, we actually take some air, cool it off, and then we just jam it into the cabin, and then we have a little valve in the back that lets some of it out. So we're not using all the air we shove into it. The reason that's handy is it helps cool us off. The reason it's not handy is, like I said, we can't have less pressure inside than we have outside. So that creates a bit of a thing to worry about later. Now, for those of you looking for maximum performance climb, we're doing it right now. One of the things you'll see is your torque is going to slowly drift away as we climb here. And my interstage turbine temperature usually comes up. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm just going to nudge my throttle just a tiny bit forward. Remember, these are turboprops. They're not turbine, or they are. They're not piston engines, so we do have to be extra ginger with these things. Just a little careful. And again, you can see we're coming right up there on that yellow line. Remember, $1 million worth of engine. $1 million. It's a lot. Maybe it isn't for you, but for me, it definitely is. So all I'm checking here is I'm making sure these values stay in the green. Theoretically, you can climb at red line, but I'm still getting 2,400 feet per minute, and you can see I'm sitting here at about, 12.5 degrees, which is plenty. So on our way up, of course, our chores become things like dealing with temperature, which right now you can see we're cooling off very nicely. I wish I could just open a window in flight, because if we could close it. We could cool it off real fast. The other thing we need to be mindful of is our engine temperatures. And of course, take a look down here. Do you see we're less than 100 degrees oil temperature? So one of the things you can actually do is you can actually close the oil door. And when you do that, do not be surprised if a quarter of the way through your flight, you suddenly get a warning message that flashes and you'll get an orange reader over on this side because the oil will slowly heat up. In my experience, I've never had the oil overheat. And again, like I said, I'm sure maybe there is a way to overheat it, but it's never happened to me, so to speak. But again, having that door closed is just going to make sure it stays at the more optimum, which remember how much this thing costs. So we're climbing perfectly. I'm taking a look. ITT's gone down a little bit, so is their torque. I'm just going to go give it just another little nudge of thrust there. And you are going to hit a sweet spot where no matter how hard you push the throttle forward, you're not getting anything else out of it. It's just kind of, like I said, part of the fun. All right. So we're going to go ahead and pause the video here, and I'll pick up with the next video. Like I said, this is a great little opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and slam those a little more closed there. Those were slightly cracked. I must have grabbed it by accident. So this is a pretty good place to go ahead and stop our video here now that we've kind of gotten going up, and we'll deal with all of our cruising chores next. By the way, notice the master caution, notice the oil door. Told you. Enjoy.